Oh, right. Yeah. Someone said in the comments the other day, do Peter Hitchin debate abortion? And I'm guessing this is it. Because I searched for it and quite a few things come up, but none of them was really debates. One of them was like him, Ben Shapiro, and someone else. Their arguments cut together in a compilation, but yeah, I'm guessing this is it. Hitchens versus Rutherford. I don't really know nothing about him or this other guy, to be honest. But yeah, a debate on abortion. Let's go.
Families behind them is a terrific advance. I don't happen to think so. That's one of the really powerful moral questions which has been raised by the de-Christianization
You
of
also,
society.
at various points, mention abortion, which I'm guessing is, for you, another example of one of these issues, because of what you saw in the Soviet system as well.
Well, it was the main method of contraception. It was, I think, at the point that I was living there, the number of abortions outnumbered the number of live births. And it seems to me to be plainly wrong to kill a living creature. But it's one of those things where people say, oh, well, you don't need the Ten Commandments to tell you how to behave. Well, I have to tell you that if the Ten Commandments are removed from this, then people will immediately say, oh, no, abortion is not murder, it's just a blob of jelly. This thing doesn't matter, it's not a life, it doesn't count. Because people will always, just as they will do the same with the atrocious massacre of German civilians by Bomber Command during the 1940s. They'll always say, "Oh, that was all right. That was morally justified." People will always morally justify murder when they think it suits them, and they will keep on doing it unless you have an absolute code which prevents it.
Okay, so when we do away with this absolute code, which secularism would do away with, we increasingly open the door to the ill effects Peter's suggesting of that we see in society.
So you're suggesting that if we have no God in society, then abortions will become the main method of contraception?
Well, they virtually have done.
Virtually-
It goes right ever since the abortion law reform in 1967 was predicated on the idea that there would be very few abortions, that it would prevent the illegal abortions taking place in back streets, which everyone was worried about, and that it was a last resort which would only be undertaken when two doctors had consented to it. Year by year, the numbers of abortions go up and up and up, and the numbers of abortions which actually are performed on people who've had abortions before, not just once or twice, but 3 or 4 times, goes up and up, because it's a backstop. If people can't be bothered to use contraception and they find themselves pregnant, they have an abortion. And the more of it there is, the more of it there is. It's statistically demonstrable. Even with immense amounts of propaganda about condoms distributed to people at incredibly young ages, and the morning after pill and all the rest of it, abortion carries on going up. It seems to me to be completely demonstrable that the legalization of abortion has led to more of it, and will continue to lead to more.
So let me just get this straight. So in your, I'm not quite sure what you're proposing as a model for how things should be, but one of the things that you are suggesting is that all forms of abortion is illegal. Is that
Well,
right?
as a matter of fact, I mean, I personally feel that, and would say that abortion under all circumstances is wrong. But as a matter of fact, the law before 1967 was based upon a court case in which a doctor had aborted a child who'd been raped by 3 soldiers just round the corner from Whitehall in, I think, 1938. And he was cleared by the court on the basis that his action had been justifiable, and on that basis it was possible for people to have abortions under extreme circumstances, which I think was probably a sensible compromise. Those doctors who wanted to perform abortions hated the law because it put the burden of proof on them that they had actually acted in a genuine emergency. So there are two issues here. One, the personal moral one. One, the issue of just how far society can legislate. As far as I'm concerned, it's wrong. There's no circumstance under which an adoption wouldn't be better than an abortion. But if people really, really feel that an abortion is essential, I suppose you could leave room for it. But the existing law, which effectively licenses abortion on demand, is a criminal act, as far as I'm concerned.
There's no circumstances. Could you just repeat that? There's no circumstances where abortion is acceptable.
To be fair to him, yeah, I know the people have some like painted the abortion thing as a woman's right thing. Yeah, like a liberation of women. But you will actually find like most of the women in my family, if they find out a woman they know has had an abortion, like take my mum, it will put her straight off them. My mum's not religious. She's not political. She's not none of that. It's just a gut feeling of "Oh, I don't agree with that. Like that's it. That's all she's going off is I don't like that. Like, and I've said before that girls, like young girls who get pregnant, say we'll take like a young teen girl who gets pregnant, doesn't want to tell her parents she wants to have an abortion. Like that happens all the time, and I know girls that's happened to, and then they've gone through with an abortion. And some of the most lack of like not care, like I'm talking about girls that don't care about anything other than what they want. Like girls that don't care about their family, don't care about themselves, don't care about nothing, but they have an abortion and it affects them in an incredibly, not just physically but emotionally, mentally, everything. Like it does affect girls and women because like your body, your mind, everything is preparing. It's like you see it with like lionesses when their cub dies and gets killed. You'll see it. They will adopt something else smaller because that maternal thing is still triggered in them. Now, obviously, women is different, but there's still a like it is something that not every girl like I say, I know girls that like don't care about anything or anyone, but they've had abortions and they would never do it again because it, do you know what I mean, destroys you. Like your body is preparing you for something that all of a sudden unnaturally has been ripped out of you. And yeah, they'll never go through it again. So even though they try and paint the whole abortion thing as a woman's right thing, you'll find that a lot of women don't agree with it. Like just off of a gut instinct, that maternal instinct of just it's wrong. But yeah, let's go.
Circumstances in which I can see where abortion is preferable to adoption.
So, for example, in the case where the mother's life was at risk, or the child was going to be born with severe abnormalities, in those situations, acceptable or not?
Well, I think mother's life being at risk is a difficult problem. I don't know whether you can give me any instances of it where an abortion would be the only way of dealing with the problem.
But I can't give any specific
no,
instances.
I'm not sure it's raised all the
doctor.
time, and I'm not quite sure what these positions are. I mean, cesarean section is extremely easy these days. I don't know of any circumstance, and the response to a baby being imperfect doesn't seem to me to be to kill it. We're not entitled to do so, and that you wouldn't do it if an imperfect child existed outside the womb. We all know which regime it was that used to massacre imperfect people after they'd been born. I don't myself see a fundamental difference between killing someone because they're imperfect in the womb and killing someone because they're imperfect outside the womb. Maybe you do.
There is a like doctors like I worked with this guy. It was actually kind of weird because it was the first time really that I'd been around him for a long time. It was quite a big company, loads of people, you're working with different people. It was the first time me and him was on a job together. He started talking about his kids and then he told me this story about basically him and his girlfriend's first baby. It got to a certain point of development where it's like a baby basically, and at that point they like it's still you could abort it, but it was developing and the doctors had worked out that it's gonna have Down syndrome, it's gonna be retarded. And he's like, they said do you want to, do you still want to keep it? And he's like, me and my girlfriend was like, yeah, of course. And then they was like, the doctor said to him, if you give birth to this baby, it's going to be like 98% gone. It's like basically, they was like, your baby will never know its own name. It will never know what it is. It will never know its mum's voice. It will never be able to, it will basically just like, it will never develop. It will like, do you know what I mean? It will just, he's like, the doctors basically said, you should, yeah, terminate it. So they did. And he said they, like his wife or his girlfriend still had to give birth to the baby. They kind of, she done it, took it. Like, imagine the trauma they're going through already. It's their first kid. So they took the baby away, right? And then said to them, come back. The doctors come back in and said, oh, do you want to give it? Basically, the baby was alive, but it was going to be alive a matter of a couple of hours. And then it would be dead because it hadn't developed enough to keep itself going. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and the doctors come in and he's like, they literally said to us, do you want to give it a bottle before it dies? And he's like, they were like, no. He's like, that's like the worst thing you like. Imagine the trauma you're going through already with everything that comes before, and now they want to give you the baby to bond with it, so that you can bond with it and then watch it die. Like, so yeah, there are cases where the doctors will say, look, it's better for this child. Like this child, like they said, it's not going to be able to like it's going to be like basically nothing will function on it, and it will just need constant looking after. Like yeah. So there are some that's an extreme case. Do you know what I mean? I know loads of people. Everybody has kids. I don't. That's the only person I've. Do you know what I mean? I only worked with him for about 3 hours. I was standing there thinking, this is a bit heavy, bruv. What'd you say to that?
I don't know what it is.
Uh, well, so let me ask. Well, so let me ask you this question. I'm assuming that you believe that a person that at the point of conception, when a sperm fertilizes an egg, that becomes a person.
That seems to me to be the only sustainable view. You can't find. I don't think science has been able to find any other point at which you can define the beginning of life.
No, there isn't a consensus on the
No,
beginning of a human.
It's not possible. It seems to me to be the point at which.
So, what characteristics of a single cell fertilized egg are human?
Well, all of them, as far as I can see.
What they are capable of communication, they're capable of social interactions, they're capable of forming independent views.
Those aren't. That's not the characteristics of the human. This will grow into a human being unless it is prevented from doing so by violence.
So what about? Are you also opposed to things like in vitro fertilization?
I'm confused about it, to be honest, and don't claim any expertise on it. I have Roman Catholic friends who constantly try and persuade me to take stern positions. I don't, because I don't know enough about it, but it does seem to me to be self-evident that killing unborn babies is wrong. And every opportunity I have to say it, I'll say it, because it just seems to me to be so blindingly obvious and such an immense wickedness in our society that if I didn't...
Also, that guy's thing, Bill Burr, has a great stand-up bit where he says, when they say, oh, it's not killing a baby, it's like he said, what single cell thing can communicate? But you know what I mean? People are born mutes, people are born deaf, people are born blind. It doesn't mean that you kill them. But Bill Burr says, is like when people go, oh yeah, but it's not a baby, it's a fetus or it's a single cell. Do you know what I mean? They always have that. And Bill Burr's like, yeah, but if you leave it, it will become a baby. He's like, that's like, right, you make a cake and you put all the ingredients in, you mix them all up, you put it in the oven, and you're going to wait for half an hour. He's like, and I come in at like 10 minutes into it cooking. He's like, you're off waiting for it. I come in, take the cake and just throw it, just chuck it. Like, when you come back in and you go, what? Where's my cake? He's like, well, you don't go, well, actually, if you, it's not a cake. It wasn't a cake yet. It was just a bunch of ingredients mixed together. It wasn't a cake yet for another. It was like, yeah, but if you'd have fucking left it, I would have a cake now. Hold on 2 secs. Yeah, let's carry on. Let's go.
Even if it disadvantaged me to say it, then I would be failing in my duty.
I mean, you've asked for clarification on Peter's position. I'd be interested in hearing your position here, Adam, because am I to take it from what you've been saying that you believe what science shows us about the cell, indeed I think you presented a whole programme on television about the cell, shows that we can have good reason for believing that life doesn't begin at this stage, that it is in effect then the progress we've made in the last 50 years that gives us good reason for believing that there isn't any damage being done when we abort a child. I don't know, the term currently in the UK is what? The cut-off term is
24 weeks
24
legally.
weeks.
Although we're
Do you believe there's a sort of that's
a lot.
justified scientifically, that we can come to these conclusions not because of a morality in a book, but because we've scientifically looked into this and decided this is the moral sort of framework?
There's two different questions at stake here.
Jesus, right? That his argument completely falls down if people are getting. If he's going on about a single cell and then there's people aborting babies at 6 months, like that's a hell of a long time to make that decision up. All right, maybe the first like couple of days where you realise you're pregnant, or like maybe, do you know what I mean? Like 6 months, you should have is way too long. Do you know what I mean? That's basically a baby, innit?
The first is, at what point does a fertilised egg become a person? And there is no scientific consensus on this. There is no scientific definition of what that could possibly be.
You're slipping, though, from human to a person. You're trying to define the human not as a physically, objectively existing thing, but as a social being, which, of course, no one in a womb can be. So presumably you're not a person until the moment you're born, by that definition, but you're still a human.
Well,
I mean, this kind of sophistry is what you get when people want to justify killing for their own.
Yeah, and if a serial killer murders a pregnant one, do you get done for 2 murders? Would it be classed as murder then?
Convenience. An abortion is conducted almost invariably for the convenience of others.
Let's allow Adam to finish there. Yeah.
But as I said, there isn't a scientific consensus on it. The reason we have 24 weeks as the cut-off point, unless there are medical reasons to extend beyond that, is because there's no scientific evidence that younger fetuses than 24 weeks have an increased survival rate.
Listen to the word fetus. It's a fetus. It's a nice Latin word. It's dehumanized already. It's not a baby. It's a fetus.
That's correct.
It's dehumanized so you can kill it.
It's not a baby.
That's what killers always do. They dehumanize their victim.
That's very true.
A fetus is not a baby, and there's no possible way that you could argue that a fetus is a baby.
And a Jew is not a person.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
A black person's not a person. Should we have them as slaves?
You can show anything on British television, any kind of disemboweling, almost any kind of sexual activity. You can play any word. They were using 4-letter words on the 10 o'clock news on the BBC last night, but the one thing you cannot show on television is film of an abortion and what it involves, because it shows quite plainly that what is being destroyed is a human person.
Well, that's also not true, though that has been shown on TV, and I've worked with fetuses that have been aborted. I can't quote the specific documentaries, but they do exist. I have seen it on TV. Also, I have worked with aborted fetuses.
TV, never.
No, that is incorrect. I don't have that reference.
Well, if you're going to maintain it's incorrect, you're going to have to tell me what it was.
Well, I can't do it now, but maybe I'll email.
Then don't say it's incorrect.
I have worked with aborted fetuses. I have during the course of my scientific studies, and I don't believe that the things that I have dealt with in the lab situation, which have come from abortions, are human beings. They look like them, they resemble them in physically, but they are not human beings.
Good Lord, I mean, this is concentration camp
The
language.
question is, though, I suppose...
They look like humans, but hey, no, they're not. They're Jews.
I mean...
That's literally what I just said. But yeah, that's a very bad way he's arguing. Yeah. that they look like people, but they're not people. It's like he said, that's exactly what I said. Black people weren't considered black people in slavery. Do you know what I mean? They was like animals. They was considered like cattle. They was classed as people's like livestock. Jews, Hitler had Jews as vermin. Even the gas that killed the Jews is a slightly modified, like, rat killer, or like, yeah, vermin killer. Do you know what I mean? So it shows you that, yeah, yeah, the very bad argument that was. I completely agree with the other guy, Peter.
I'm puzzled by that.
It's amazing.
Why
They're not
is
human
that?
beings. It's the oldest thing in the book. Isn't it? Before you kill, you dehumanize. You say they're not really. No. I'm not. This isn't any kind of killing of a human being. It's something else. We declassify it. We give it another name. Give me strength. Okay, you want to believe that? You believe it, but it's the most perfect illustration of the position in which the person who acknowledges no absolute law gets himself into. He can argue himself within 10 minutes into the most appalling positions without even realizing that they're appalling.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that the point that is being made here, Adam, is what gives you the moral authority to decide when a human life begins.
He's a scientist, that's what.
But,
No,
I mean, is it that?
Science doesn't inform my morality at all. The second question in this is, so there's the scientific point at which we fail to agree on, and science doesn't have a decent answer for, which is at what point does a fetus become a human? We've talked about that. And the second point is why I feel morally justified in supporting abortion in principle, which is to do, I believe, with the mother's right to choose her own destiny, and to the extent that it is an adult human is more important than an unborn, unsentient fetus, and I believe that is a moral absolute. And I don't see how you could argue against that.
You don't see how you could argue against it.
That adult human
how
is
do the
Well, that's
rights-
another thing. I mean, I can see
rights
how
of
you make
something
your
which
case. I can
is
see exactly how you
insentient?
make it. I can see how you can arrive at your conclusion. I used to believe it. This piffle, but and I can perfectly well see how you arrive at it. You can't see how anyone can imagine that what you call a fetus might be human and that it might be wrong to kill it.
Well,
You
I
really
can
can't
see
see
it.
that
I
it
can't
might
see
be.
it, but
You
it
can't see that
doesn't
the
make any
woman's
sense to me.
right to choose doesn't somehow interfere with the unborn child's right to live.
The unborn
If you're
child
dealing with
doesn't-
these rights, or it doesn't have one, or is
How
that
is-
right so small? And what is this right to choose? On what grounds is it exercised exactly? What do you have to prove these days to establish that you can choose to kill this person who, in your view, isn't a human and in my view is, but might be?
I'm not arguing that abortion should be available, freely available to everyone as a means of contraception that you've asserted occurred,
So what
occurred in
limits would
Russia.
you put upon it?
I believe that education about sex education is important in preventing the negative aspects of sex.
Ever
And
since
that-
we had sex education, we've had more abortion. We've had more out of wedlock and early pregnancy. We've had more sexually transmitted disease. I can't actually establish, because the work hasn't been done, that sex education leads to these things. But if its stated purpose is to reduce them, then it has failed abjectly ever since it began.
Okay.
It's a mathematical connection. In this country, sex education has been accompanied by an increase in all the things it claims to prevent and contain.
Well, you assert that, and correlation and
Well, it's
causation
true.
are not
I
the
need to
same.
assert it.
But let me ask you this then: in place of sex education, which attempts to reduce the negative aspects of sex, such as unwanted pregnancies and STDs, what would you have in its place?
I wouldn't have anything in its place. I don't think it's the business of schools to teach people how to put condoms on hockey sticks and bananas. I think the schools are not there for this purpose. I think sex education, I think is what George Lukács thought when he introduced it during the Hungarian Bolshevik uprising, was always an attempt to debauch and demoralize Christian societies. That's what its purpose is.
But children are going to have sex. Teenagers are going to have
they?
sex. Yes.
Are they?
Yes.
Are you sure? Are they going to
Are
have
you
sex
proposing not
under all
that
circumstances?
16-year-olds shouldn't have sex?
I'm saying that people shouldn't have sex outside marriage. That's my belief.
And so how do you engender that? So I don't believe there are any.
By having a strong moral system, which makes it plain that this is how people should behave.
And you think that that will prevent teenagers from having sex with each other?
To a large extent, yes, it will. No human system is infallible. Humans are, as we know, or as I know, fallen creatures. So yes, there will be people who defy that morality, but you don't actually need to make much effort to study our own society's past to see just how much horror and dislike were actually directed against adultery and against premarital and extramarital sex, and how our society was different. You may say that it was worse than it was, and I may say that it was better, but there's absolutely no question that a strong morality generally accepted changes the behaviour of society and makes it different. And one of the things it makes different is the attitude towards children, who in our society are disposable in the womb and neglected and tossed aside in life, with catastrophic consequences.
We are going to have to take another break, I'm afraid, at this point, and we'll be actually starting to wind up our conversation. You're listening to...
Yeah, I think he definitely won, because I think that other guy, what's his name, Rutherford, he realised as he was saying what he was saying, kind of how bad it sounds. That's insane that you can abort a baby at 6 months in the belly. That's crazy. Like I say, that is like, it's a fetus, and yeah. I listened to recently Bartley Gorman's book. I recommend it. King of the Travellers, Gypsies, Travellers. Bartley Gorman. His whole book's about fighting and being king of the travellers. That, do you know what I mean? But he says I'm not just some caveman who likes to fight. I have a lot of opinions on things, and then he said I feel very strongly about abortion, and that he's like I find it he's like I find it wrong for a doctor to spend his whole day giving abortions and then go home and kiss his kids on the head good night. Do you know what I mean? I thought that's a very great point. Like, I've never heard anybody raise that point, that you're gonna go and spend your whole life taking children away and then go home and kiss yours good night. But yeah, then he started changing it and started getting into the political thing, because there's people that you say the political side and they just cheer because they're part of that thing. And he definitely tried to do that to him here with when he said an adult, a fetus should come second to an adult life. Why? Like, he just kind of made statements, but then didn't really have anything to back it up. And when he did explain his idea, it just made him sound awful. Right? When he said, I've worked with aborted fetuses, and I don't consider them humans. They may look human. But yeah, they look like a baby, and you're just cutting it up, and bizarre. It's bizarre to me. Yeah. And I don't hold much weight in the argument of it's a woman's right. Like Dave Chappelle said, if it's a woman's right to choose whether or not she has the baby, it should be a man's right to choose whether or not he pays for it. But yeah, this was good. No, this was good. And you know what? I expected him to be like a Jesse Lee Peterson type of, just like, do you know what I mean? Jesse Lee Peterson wouldn't go nowhere near as in depth into the argument as Peter Hitchens did. He'd just say, "Yeah, it's Satan is your daddy or something. Do you know what I mean? That's what I thought he was going. But he had to me personally, and I'm not someone who, like, people have said I'm right wing, and I'm I'm not in the slightest. But I was expecting him to be like kind of very like but he actually seemed like he'd really thought about it. I liked that when he was asked about something else, he said, "I don't really know I don't have a strong opinion. I don't speak out on that because I don't really know about it." But yeah, I see a couple of times the other guy tried to like sidestep, and yeah, instead of actually arguing the point he just had, he just throws another point, a different point. It's like that's why you heard Peter Hitchens laughing, because it was just like, yeah, and like Peter Hitchens said himself, you don't realise how awful you actually like. You're talking yourself into just sounding awful. Yeah, and to be honest, yeah, the truth of it is, everyone loves Baby. It's just true. Everyone loves Baby. But yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.